Listen to me now, not as someone speaking at you, but as a voice cutting through the noise you've been living in. Because if there is one thing you must understand, it is that this moment is not random. You didn't stumble onto these words by accident. And the reason they hit differently is because they are touching a truth you've been avoiding, not because you are weak, but because you are aware. And awareness is uncomfortable when it demands change. Because change requires you to let go of the version of yourself that learned how to survive instead of thrive. The version that adapted to disappointment, normalized frustration, and slowly convinced itself that this was just how life is supposed to feel. But deep down, you know that's a lie. You know, because there are moments when you imagine a different life so vividly that it almost hurts. Moments when you see yourself more disciplined, more confident, more decisive. Moments when you know exactly what you should be doing, but you don't do it. And the pain doesn't come from not knowing. It comes from knowing and still staying the same. And that pain is not meant to break you. It is meant to wake you up. Yet most people numb it. They drown it in distractions, in entertainment, in scrolling, in excuses, in blaming circumstances, parents, society, timing, luck, anything that allows them to avoid the hardest truth of all, which is that their life is not happening to them. It is responding to them. And every day you wake up and repeat the same patterns. You are silently voting for the same future. And time does not care about your intentions. It only responds to your actions. And that is why years pass faster than we expect. Because when days look the same, the mind compresses them. And suddenly you look back and wonder where the time went. And the real fear is not death. It is reaching the end of your life and realizing you lived far beneath what you were capable of. And that fear you feel when you think about wasted potential is not negativity. It is guidance. It is your higher self demanding alignment, because you were not designed to merely exist. You were designed to grow, to stretch, to overcome. And when you don't, something inside you rebels. And that rebellion shows up as frustration, anxiety, restlessness, and dissatisfaction. Not because life is cruel, but because your soul knows you're playing small. And the moment you stop seeing those feelings as problems and start seeing them as signals, everything changes. Because now, instead of asking what's wrong with me, you ask, what am I being called to become? And that question changes the trajectory of your life, because now you are no longer asleep at the wheel. Now you are conscious. And consciousness removes excuses, because once you see clearly, you cannot pretend you don't know. And once you know, you are responsible, not in a heavy way, but in a powerful way, because responsibility means responsibility, the ability to respond differently. And right now, your life is asking you to respond differently, to stop waiting for confidence and start acting in spite of fear, to stop waiting for clarity and start creating it through motion, to stop waiting for motivation and start operating from standards, because motivation comes and goes, but standards decide who you become. And the hardest part of this awakening is realizing that no one is coming to save you, but the most empowering part is realizing you don't need saving, because the same force that created your frustration also created your potential. And once you accept that your past does not define you, your habits do, and habits can be rebuilt, you stop feeling trapped and start feeling challenged, and challenge is fuel when you aim it correctly. And this is where your life begins to pivot, not because circumstances change overnight, but because you change how you meet them. And the moment you decide that drifting is no longer acceptable, that comfort is no longer your priority. And had alignment matters more than approval, you step out of survival mode and into leadership over your own life. And leadership begins with honesty, brutal honesty, the kind that says, I have wasted time, but I am not out of time. I have made mistakes, but I am not my mistakes. I have lived small, but I do not have to stay small. And when that honesty becomes a decision instead of a thought, this moment becomes the dividing line between who you were and who you are becoming. Now let's go where most people refuse to go, because this is not about trying harder or pushing longer for a few days before slipping back into old patterns. This is about dismantling the identity that keeps recreating the same results. Because here is the truth most people never hear clearly. You do not get what you want in life. You get what you believe you are. And every belief you hold about yourself quietly dictates what you attempt, what you tolerate, what you walk away from, and what you settle for. And that is why people can read the same books, watch the same videos, hear the same advice, and still end up in completely different places. Because information does not change lives, identity does. And right now, the invisible ceiling on your life is not your skill, your intelligence, or your circumstances. It is the story you have been telling yourself about who you are and what is possible for you. And stories are powerful because you live them automatically without questioning them until the day you decide to rewrite them. And that day is not comfortable, because the old identity will fight to survive. It will whisper that change is dangerous, that consistency is exhausting, that discipline is punishment, that you will fail anyway. And that voice sounds convincing because it has kept you safe before, safe from embarrassment, safe from rejection, safe from discomfort. But safety and fulfillment are not the same thing. And the identity that protects you from pain often protects you from growth. growth, and growth requires a new set of standards, not goals, standards, because goals are things you pursue occasionally. But standards are rules you live by daily, and if your standard is to do what feels easy when you're tired, you will always stop short of your potential. But if your standard is to show up regardless of mood, your life has no choice but to rise, because standards remove negotiation, and negotiation is where dreams go to die, because every time you negotiate with yourself, you weaken your self-trust, and self-trust is the foundation of confidence, not loud confidence, not fake confidence, but the quiet certainty that you can rely on yourself when things get hard, and that certainty is built through consistency, not intensity, through keeping promises when no one is watching, through doing the boring work long after the excitement fades. And this is why most people fail, not because they lack desire, but because they lack identity alignment. They want the results of a disciplined person without becoming one. They want the confidence of a consistent person without living consistently. And life does not work that way. Life rewards congruence, and congruence means your actions match your standards match your identity, and your identity matches your vision. And when those are aligned, momentum becomes unstoppable, because now you are no longer forcing change, you are expressing who you are becoming. And this is where self-mastery begins, not in controlling the world, but in controlling your responses to it. Because you cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control what it means and what you do next. And meaning shapes emotion, and emotion drives behavior. And when you consciously choose meaning, you reclaim power. So instead of seeing discomfort as a threat, you see it as training. Instead of seeing failure as proof you are not enough, you see it as feedback guiding refinement. Instead of seeing effort as suffering, you see it as self-respect in action. And this shift is subtle but profound, because now life stops happening to you and starts happening through you, and the internal resistance that once drained your energy dissolves, because you are no longer fighting who you are becoming who you decided to be. And that decision is renewed daily, not once, daily, because identity is not claimed, it is practiced. And every day you either reinforce the old identity or you vote for the next. W1 through action, and these votes compound, quietly at first, invisibly, until one day you look back and realize that the person you used to be would not even recognize how you live now, how you think now, how you respond now. And that is the power of standards lived consistently. They change your internal environment. And when your internal environment changes, your external world must follow, because life always mirrors the level of order, discipline, and self-respect you cultivate within. And this is the moment where excuses lose their grip, because excuses cannot survive in a life governed by standards. And once excuses disappear, progress becomes inevitable, not dramatic, not instant, but inevitable. And inevitability is more powerful than motivation, because motivation is emotional, but inevitability is structural. It is built into who you are, and when you reach this level, quitting no longer feels like relief, it feels like betrayal. Not because someone else is watching, but because you are. And that self-awareness becomes your greatest accountability. And accountability is not pressure, it is clarity. Clarity about who you are, what you stand for, and what you refuse to tolerate. And when you live with that clarity, discipline becomes natural, focus becomes sharper, and your energy stops leaking into doubt, comparison, and hesitation. And instead it flows into execution, refinement, and growth. And this is how mastery is formed, not through perfection, but through alignment repeated over time. And once alignment becomes your default, your life no longer feels like a constant uphill battle. It feels like forward motion, purposeful, demanding, but deeply fulfilling, because you are finally living in integrity with your potential. Now we arrive at the place where truth becomes action and action becomes destiny. Because nothing you have read so far matters unless it changes how you live when this message ends. And this is where most people quietly retreat, not because they disagree, but because transformation demands something they are not used to giving consistently, which is effort without immediate reward, discipline without applause, and commitment without guarantees. And yet this is the exact place where lives are rebuilt, because action is the final filter that separates intention from identity and identity from results. And understand this deeply, your life is not shaped by what you know, it is shaped by what you do repeatedly, especially when it would be easier not to, because ease is seductive. It whispers that rest is harmless, that skipping once does not matter, that comfort today will not cost you tomorrow, but comfort always sends the bill later, and it is paid in regret, self-doubt, and the quiet pain of knowing you could have done more. And that pain compounds over time, just like discipline does. And this is the truth few people accept early enough. Discipline and regret are both painful, but they create opposite futures. And the future you experience will be decided by which pain you choose daily. Not dramatically, not heroically, but consistently. Because destiny is built in ordinary moments handled with extraordinary responsibility. Moments where you decide to show up when you don't feel like it. Moments where you do the work even when motivation is absent. Moments where you keep moving even when progress feels invisible. And these moments do not look impressive from the outside, but they are powerful beyond measure. because they are shaping who you are becoming. And who you become determines what you can sustain, and sustainability is what creates real success. Not bursts of effort followed by collapse, but steady forward motion, guided by standards. And this is where pain must be redefined, because pain is unavoidable, but its meaning is optional. And most people interpret pain as a signal to stop, to retreat, to protect themselves, but those who grow interpret pain as instruction, as training, as resistance designed to strengthen them. And once you adopt that meaning, pain stops being the enemy and starts becoming the pathway, because every discipline you avoid today becomes a weakness tomorrow, and every discipline you embrace today becomes strength you can rely on later. And this is how confidence is truly built, not through affirmations, not through hype, but through evidence. Evidence that you can trust yourself to act when it counts. And that trust changes everything. It changes how you see obstacles, how you respond to pressure, how you carry yourself in uncertainty, because now your confidence is not dependent on outcomes. It is grounded in character, and character is destiny in motion. And this is why daily action matters more than big dreams, because dreams inspire, but actions install, and what you install daily becomes your operating system, and your operating system determines your automatic responses, and your automatic responses determine your long-term trajectory. And once you understand that, you stop romanticizing motivation and start building structure, because structure supports you when willpower fades, and willpower always fades, but structure remains, and structure is not restrictive, it is liberating, because it removes decision fatigue, it removes internal debate, it removes the constant question of should I or shouldn't I, and replaces it with this is what I do. And that clarity saves enormous energy that most people waste arguing with themselves, and when that energy is redirected into execution, progress accelerates, not overnight, but inevitably. And inevitability is the most powerful force you can create in your life, because when something is inevitable, doubt loses its power, hesitation loses I, TS grip, and excuses no longer make sense, because the path forward is no longer optional, it is simply the direction you move. And along that path you will face setbacks, frustration, and moments of deep fatigue. And these moments are not signs you are failing, they are signs you are paying the price of growth. And every meaningful life is paid for in advance with effort, discomfort, and persistence. And the question is not whether you will pay a price, but which price you will pay. The price of discipline now or the price of regret later. And regret is always heavier, because discipline ends in pride, strength, and freedom, while regret ends in self-reproach, bitterness, and longing for a past you cannot change. And the people who build extraordinary lives are not immune to fear or fatigue. They simply decide that fear will not be the decision maker, and fatigue will not be the excuse. And that decision is renewed daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes moment by moment, but it is renewed. And renewal is what keeps momentum alive, because momentum is fragile in the beginning, but unstoppable once established. And one day, quietly, without fireworks, you will realize that the behaviors that once required force now feel natural, that the standards that once felt heavy now feel obvious, and that the life you once dreamed about is no longer something you chase, it is something you live, not because everything is easy, but because everything is aligned. And alignment creates a deep sense of fulfillment that comfort never can. And in that moment, you will understand that your destiny was never something waiting for you in the future, it was something you were, building daily through action, through discipline, through the willingness to choose growth over ease again and again. And that realization will be one of the most powerful moments of your life, because you will know without doubt that you earned the life you are living, and nothing can take that away from you. And that is the ultimate reward, not success, not recognition, but self-respect, the knowledge that you honored your potential with action, and that knowledge will carry you through every challenge ahead. Because once you have proven to yourself that you can become disciplined, consistent, and aligned, there is no limit to what you can build. And from that place, your future is no longer a question mark. It is a continuation of who you have decided to be.